Mall of America. It's home to world-class shopping, great dining, and amazing attractions and events. And these are our stories, presented by Bloomington, Minnesota Travel and Tourism.
Welcome to this episode of So Much More. We are continuing our conversation with Arik Hanson, social media expert, and the conversation continues. You know, a couple of things on LinkedIn specifically that I've seen is that I have noticed more use of video, right? More. And that's the main one I want to talk about. Is there value to that? And okay, this is a two-part question, starting with video. And then the other one is, what if you're a really busy executive? I believe some top-level executives maybe have people do their postings for them. Your thoughts on that? So two very diverse questions in one.
Let's tackle
He's
video
really good
first.
about loading them all.
I am. And go.
Let's start with the video. So you're right, the video, LinkedIn has actually come out and said, like, this is a priority for us in the algorithm. They're favoring that. So having more video in general makes sense. The trick is, how do you make it seem, going back to the authenticity angle, how do you make it seem real and authentic, not like I'm, a corporate spokesperson and I'm going to talk on camera. So that's where, like, I think, if I'm you guys, again, most people don't have the benefit of having this wonderful backdrop that is the mall at your disposal. Most people work in an office building and it's very sterile, and like, they don't have the backdrop. You guys have a huge backdrop, I think, that you can take advantage of if I was doing video, where it might not be like you're behind a conference table and you're doing this, which you don't want anyways. It'd be like you roaming the mall and telling a story that way.
I like it.
That you have a wonderful opportunity, I think, to do that with video. I'm thinking from a LinkedIn perspective.
Yeah.
Because LinkedIn video is really hard. It's like it all comes across as super stiff and super corporate-y. But that, I think, if I was you guys, I would kind of take advantage of the backdrop.
Good.
And then remind me of your second question. I forgot the second question.
I believe some executives may have other people write their content for them. Pros, cons. Yes. What are your thoughts on that?
The rating other people's content. So that for sure happens, obviously.
Yeah.
I can only speak to what I do with executives. When I try to work with them, even if they say, Arik, we want you to help us develop the content, my reaction is usually, let me take a first stab, and then I want you to make this yours.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, and then we go back and forth that way. So it's like, I'm kind of in that situation, I'm kind of like AI for them. Like, I'm giving them the starting point, but like then they're gonna kind of change it and make it a little more personal. And that approach works okay. It works pretty good. It's obviously best if you can coach them up and have them do it on their own. And a lot of times the conversation is like, for me, it's like, well, if you want me to create the content, this isn't going to work, and I don't think you should do it.
Yeah.
You have to have a little skin in the game, and ideally it needs to be all you. So I think about the executives that I've talked to that do it the best. That's what they do. It's all them.
Yeah.
And I coach them once in a while, or someone coaches them, but it's mostly them.
So you brought up AI. Very curious of your thoughts of how that's going to change the conversation. I know already it's depending on how it's used. Sometimes I find it very entertaining because of what is able to be created. I just saw, it's been out there for a little while, but it's the little kids that are on the runway that they're dressed up in the Halloween costumes and stuff. And it's like, okay, this is not possible, but super cute and it's entertaining.
Made you laugh.
It made me laugh. It put a smile on my face. But then when it's used for purposes, when it's actually content that people are believing in, and you have to, and I appreciate the brands that are putting icons or labeling the fact that it is AI generated, but there are some that are not. Where do you see that going?
I will preface this by saying I am not an AI expert. There's plenty of people that know a lot more about than I do. But my take on it is that I think you're starting to see some blowback in terms of people saying there's too much AI-driven content on the social channels already.
Yeah.
You're seeing that on LinkedIn. You're seeing people complain about it specifically. So I think we're on the precipice of seeing that. At the same time, I think it's a really great tool for from a communication standpoint, for researching and brainstorming. Like, that's how I hear when I talk to my corporate friends about, like, how are you using this stuff really? That's what they say, those two things. So if you think about a tool called, like Google's Notebook LM, like that's a perfect example. Like, you use that thing, you can, put all this information in there, and it gives you FAQs, it gives you a podcast where you can listen to it in your downtime, summarize the information. Like, to me, that's a pretty useful way to use it, where it makes your life easier versus like, I'm not going to use it to like create social content necessarily, but to brainstorm maybe rough ideas for things down the future, down the road, yeah, maybe that. That's kind of where I see it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think driving efficiency has been absolutely key, getting thought starters, getting outlines developed. I love summarizing notes, like even just going to Shop Talk recently. I literally was recording some of the presentations. I was using Otter to record some of the presentations. I was dropping in notes and then being able to summarize, 3 days worth of content. And that way I can bring it back to the team and say, okay, here are the highlights. But it was such a time saver. So I definitely agree with you from that perspective.
What else are you guys doing with AI at the moment?
We're using it for a variety of different tools internally, more for that brainstorm and just thought generation, even just drafting up proposals and some outlines, things like that. Looking at it from a design perspective for production purposes, again, starting the creative process internally, making sure we have the concepting, but when you have to resize it for 50 different sizes for different formats, having tools to help us do that is really helpful. And also looking at it, and I think this was one of the topics that Shop Talk focused on, was using tools for your frontline staff to be able to solve problems, answer questions for your consumers versus having to go to your managers, supervisors, things like that. So finding the right tools, not a lot of great ideas and execution with the guest perspective, but I think those internal tools, making things efficient, are a game changer. I mean, that really helps with the operations of the staff.
You may not know this about me. Switching topics a little bit, is I am, well, shall we say, addicted to TikTok, which is hilarious because I was the one who was like saying, when we were talking about getting it, saying, oh, I don't know, we should get this.
It's a rabbit hole.
It is a rabbit hole, and I watch it way too much. But Jill and I were talking the other day, and it was a really interesting conversation. Would love to kind of get your feedback, which is there's a real mental health crisis in our country, and there's a real mental health crisis connected to social media. And what are your thoughts around that and your solutions?
Well, that's front and center for me. I have a 17-year-old senior at home and a 20-year-old sophomore in Denver. So, and those two are on their phones way more than they need to be. So I see that every day. And even like the kids at St. Thomas too, like college kids, like they're addicted to those phones, and for better or for worse. In some cases, it's really great. In a lot of cases, it's not so great.
Are you one of those professors that makes them put it away?
I do make them put the phone away. Good. Yeah, right. They need to put the phone. I mean, we're using it a lot in class, but like I try to make them put it away. I don't think it's great. I really don't. And I know I've kind of been, I've received a decent amount of pushback in the industry around that, but I don't think the scientific stats lie anymore with what it's doing to the kids, specifically to the kids here we're talking. I see it at home. I see it at St. Thomas. Like, it's not great. And it's creating a culture. I mean, we're seeing the outgrowth of this in the professional world, right? Like, the kids don't want to call people, right? They don't want to do face-to-face.
Yeah, you're right. We've had this
that's the
discussion
outgrowth
too.
of the looking at a screen your whole life, So, I think, though, they're smart enough, though, that we might see a tide shift, I think, sooner or later, because you're already starting to see some, like my son's a good example. Like he doesn't look at his phone all that much anymore. He's kind of tired of it, and he's like, I don't need to look at Instagram anymore. I don't want to look at TikTok all the time. And I don't know if that's really so much he knows what it's doing to him, but he's just kind of sick of it, and I feel like that there might be a little bit of that wave coming with the kids, but I think, I'm not sure what needs to happen exactly, but I'm not sure I have a big solution there. I just know that I agree with you. It is a big challenge for the kids right now.
It's a huge challenge. I think one of the things that Jill and I are pretty aligned on most of these issues. We see things the same way. And one of the things that I remember a while back that Jill instituted in our meetings was, everyone, your phone is either not here or you can't be looking at it, right? This is we're all connecting here in a meeting. So I think even breaks like that help, right? Otherwise, people are sitting there answering emails while they're in a meeting and they're not connecting with people and not paying attention. I love that you brought up the student aspect. You are adjunct at the University of St. Thomas and the University of Minnesota, correct?
Well, it's not currently at the University of Minnesota, just
but you
St.
have
Thomas at
been.
the minute, but I have taught at the U.
Yes.
The past,
And talk about why you, first of all, I'm hoping that brings joy to you. I'm assuming it does.
Yep, a lot.
And the impact that's had on you and why you think that role is important to yourself and to the students.
Well, for me, it's selfishly a chance to get out of the house. So we talked about the loneliness factor. That's one of the ways I combat that is teaching gets me physically over to St. Thomas a couple times a week, if not more. I'm seeing students. I'm seeing some of the other professors sometimes. I'm on campus around other people. That helps a lot. So that's number one for sure. But it's also, and I know this sounds kind of cliche, and a lot of teachers say this, but it's true, especially in social media. It's like I'm there to help them, right? I'm there to educate them and help them get smarter about social media marketing and content marketing. But at the end of the day, I end up learning as much from them as they do from me, because I'm constantly quizzing them. I do it on purpose too. Like I'm saying, I remember when it became this big thing that known more that kids were using TikTok as a search engine. It was like, tell me more about that. And we had this huge conversation about like how they're using TikTok to search for things now. This was like a year ago. And that was fascinating. I couldn't have got that information any other place. So it's really great for that. And then it just, it feels great. Like no one does the adjunct professor thing for the money. They don't really pay you that much. But it's just a lot of fun to like interact with these kids and see this is our future. And you start to develop a relationship with them. And as an adjunct, it's fun because like I tell them, like, once you leave St. Thomas, we're colleagues. I'm not the teacher anymore, and you're not the student. We're colleagues. We're equal. And that's been really fun. I've been teaching for 5 years. Like some of the kids that have been out of my class for 3 or 4 years, they have these cool jobs now. And it's like, we're kind of developed friendships with these kids, which is kind of weird, but like we're equals now. So, and it's been really fun to see what they do. So it's really rewarding that way.
And that's where LinkedIn plays such a great role because Dan and I do a lot of guest speaking at different colleges and classes, and to connect with those students or for them to have resources as they're looking for jobs, or to your point, they could be clients or vendors or partners down the road or get jobs with us. We get a lot of interns that turn into full-time employees. So we love those connections. And to your point, we're learning from them as much as they learn from us. And I love the generational differences within our office space because you talk about college students, we have a lot of young people that work here, and I thrive off of their knowledge and how they interact with brands, how they use technology.
Communication style.
Absolutely. And it's so important. We actually just recently had Jen Hellman from Golf Public on. We were talking about the differences of generations and how it is with communication and just how you show up at work and that in-person versus remote. And it's just, it pushes all of us to keep our doors open and our minds open to the opportunities that, you can look at things differently. Just the way you do it isn't always the right way. And it's great because they're going to learn from you. You have institutional knowledge. We've been here forever, but they bring such a fresh perspective, which is extremely valuable.
So what have you learned from the younger people on staff here? Is there one or two things you've learned recently?
To get them out of their chairs, to go walk down the hall. To talk in person.
People, right?
It is about, to get off the technology sometimes where you have to develop those relationships. And we do work in person at least 4 days a week. We give an optional day to work remotely. But being able to work together is so powerful because we build off each other's ideas and creativity. So we really appreciate that here. But it is understanding that how I communicate even on text message or through Teams or through any sort of digital channel that I'm more formal. Like I use punctuation and I have complete sentences. And sometimes people receive that as, oh, she's mad or she's very stern.
Right?
And so when you open up and have those conversations and learn how people receive your communication, how you're delivering it, it's like, oh, well, I can change that up. Like I'll put a smiley face. I'll change my emojis to make sure you know I'm happy.
Now she's really mad.
Well, double period. What does that mean?
Exactly. What is she saying? What's she saying? It is funny. It was a good conversation with Jen as well. One last topic, if that's all right. And Jill and I had talked about that as well. Do you want to bring it up? I think we're probably on the same page.
What are you going to talk about?
I'm sure we're on the same page. There are times when a topic might come up on social media and a brand gets pulled into it, even though it's not related. our brand, Mall of America, gets pulled into some things that have nothing to do with us.
Right.
And we'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that. It's challenging for us, right? Because we're here going like, this isn't us. This has nothing to do with us. But it's something that brands face, right?
Not always positive.
It's not always
what
probably
sometimes
not.
the challenge is.
Right. So how do you enter the conversation, or how do you
Or how you
withdraw
get out of the
from the
conversation.
conversation if you don't want to
How
be
do
a
you
part of
remove
it?
yourself from the conversation when you're not?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I probably can think about some of the cases where this has happened to you that have been kind of public, so I've probably seen some of these. But I think that is a difficult situation for you, because how do you can't. It doesn't always just go away on its own. Usually you'd say sometimes you can just kind of let it sit there and this will kind of fizzle out because the news cycle moves so fast and something will happen within 24 hours and take it away. That's usually, I would fall probably somewhere towards there, because everything's so fast now, especially now with for example, if something happened this week, just wait 5 minutes and the election will take it over, right? It's not going to matter. But other than that, I'm not sure if there's a lot you really can do, to tell you the truth, because sometimes the more you say, the more you can kind of dig the hole and give them ammunition, right? Which is usually probably what happens. So as much as I don't advocate for usually staying silent, I remember I worked with a client years ago, a retail client that I cannot name, but they would have people that would attack them politically on one side, and then depending on what they say, the other side would come in, and I'm sure you've seen this before. And this is years ago, though, so this is kind of new. And I remember talking it through, and my suggestion kind of was like, let's just stay silent and see what happens, and ended up doing some of that stuff and taking that suggestion and actually having success with that, because we got attacking from both sides. Like, there's no winning in that situation, and what are you going to do?
Agreed.
So that's a tough one, and I sympathize, but I'm not sure there's a ton you could do.
Yeah. And I know we're giving a lot of Mall of America examples on this podcast, but I'm hoping that our listeners and viewers can make it applicable to their brands or who they work with, because I think there's a lot of commonalities across some of the examples that we're giving, because to your point, we do get pulled in and we're a unique brand because we have affiliations with a lot of different things that are out there. But we have found that sometimes when we can't control the conversation, to jump in is just going to add fuel to the fire, especially to those that are engaged in the conversation that are not favorable towards it. You're not going to change their opinion. But we have found that a lot of your advocates, your fans, are going to step forward and they're going to be your voice. And so you can really stand back. It's very hard, especially for our social team that is watching every comment and paying attention. It's like, nope, you need to just walk away, because it'll work itself out. And it does. The news cycles usually happen pretty fast. And we know kind of that natural time clock of like, is it going to be a 24-hour cycle? Is it going to be 48 hours? But it's like sometimes you do need to step back. And when we have new people that come to the table and they're like, oh my gosh, can you see what people are talking about? It's like, just let it go. Let it go. But it's hard because you protect your brand. Your brand is part of your day-to-day, and you want to make sure that it's taken care of, but sometimes you just have to let it roll, which is
You're
hard.
right, though, with advocates. That's usually what happens, is your supporters will step in and kind of take some of the heat for you. But I just think about, this happens in real life too. I think about what's going on with, not to make a musical allegory here, but like Chappelle Roan with her mental health issues.
Yep.
I mean, that's a prime example. Like, she said what she's going to say. It's out there. Everyone knows how she feels, but yet she still has people attacking her every day on Instagram. And it's like, well, what's she going to do? Respond to all those people? What's your team going to do? They're not going to do that. So
it can be a tough space.
Got to take the
have
shot
to
sometimes.
So I'm curious, right now most people are very active with TikTok and Instagram, still on Facebook for your different connections, and some on X, obviously Threads that has built from there. But what else would you say we should keep our eyes out on as we look forward at the social sphere? I
think two platforms that I'm looking closely at is, number one, Reddit. So not as a way for you to jump in necessarily, especially for the mall. I'm not sure you'd want to do that. But as a listening tool, absolutely. So you can kind of uncover threads that aren't happening elsewhere on the internet on Reddit. And now with Google surfacing those search results a little bit more, that's kind of an interesting spot. They're unveiling more advertising options. Like, there's something going on with Reddit that's worth paying attention to down the line. And then number two, from a publishing standpoint, would be, and I'm not sure this has a lot of relevance to the mall, but would be Substack. Substack is kind of blowing up, and I mean, I guess in the mall sense, it does have relevance, because I think about the fashion industry. like the fashion industry is all over Substack. Like there are multiple people that have huge Substack communities in the fashion industry. So like that's becoming a nice publishing platform that, and especially with like there's weird stuff going on with WordPress right now. So like from a blogging standpoint, that kind of seems like that's where the juice is at. So that's going to be interesting to see where that goes as they mature as a platform too in the years ahead. And to see, and there's really not a lot of brands involved with Substack right now. It's more of like a creator thing, but I could see that changing very easily.
And let's maybe we'll wrap it up with this if that's all right. Let's say I work for a small company and my niece is doing part-time social media for me or something, right? What advice would you have for a small company, whether or not to engage on social and what their strategy might be? Not a big budget.
Channel prioritization. So I would say if you're a small company, like pick one channel and just do that and do it really well. So if it's a small retailer, it's probably going to be Instagram or TikTok, but like just pick one. You don't have to be on 3 or 4 channels. You can't if you have one person outfit. I think that's still the biggest mistake. That's a mistake big brands make too. Like you don't have to be on all these channels. Like just pick a few that you're really good at and that you think your customers are on and like hone in.
Don't overdo it.
Yeah.
So a follow-up to that.
Yeah.
If you focus on that one channel, do you want to secure your handle on other channels with the notion that you would want to grow into those eventually?
I mean, it's always a good idea to secure your handles just so people don't, kind of squat on them, for lack of a better term. But yeah, you never know. I mean, if you have a small business and it grows up into a huge, addicted type scenario, like, I mean, you definitely that's part of the reason why you would reserve those handles. But I still think even if you get big, it's like, that's when it becomes a problem, right? It's like, well, we need to be on all these channels. It's like, no, you don't. Just stick with the 1 or 2 that you're really good at, that your customer's on, that you can do well on. Because even if you get to be a bigger brand, you're still not, I mean, you guys are a case in point, you're still not gonna have a huge social media team. You know what I mean? Like most companies don't have more than 2 or 3 people. Like that's not a lot of people to produce all this content you need to be on these channels.
Great.
So
It's good advice. So if our listeners would like to connect with you in some way, what's the best way for them to do that, Arik?
you probably either on LinkedIn, where you can find me. My name is spelled kind of funny, Arik, Hanson. Or I'm publishing on Substack now too, which is a great way to find me. Publishing my weekly newsletter there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Arik, we really appreciate you joining us. This has been a really interesting conversation. I think we got to all the questions that Jill and I were talking about before you came. Really appreciate it, Jill.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us as always. And for all of our listeners and viewers, thanks for joining us for this edition of So Much More.
Thanks for listening to So Much More, a Mall of America podcast. Subscribe wherever you find your favorite podcasts. This show is presented by Bloomington, Minnesota Travel and Tourism.